What are you making of the rollout of these various vaccines and their distribution?
It's been very impressive that 134 million doses have been given, and the vaccines appear to be safe and effective. And increasingly, there's support for the idea that as nations increase the number of people who are vaccinated, that we should potentially see a decrease in hospitalizations. And that's been the case in Israel. It's still really important for people to realize that we really need vaccination in combination with the other interventions: masks, distancing, avoiding crowds, and hand hygiene. Those are all a part of decreasing the rate of mutation of the virus and also containing the spread of the current virus mutants.
Israel and the UK on a per capita basis are the real standout. But what about developing countries? Now, getting the vaccine to them is a challenge in itself, given that some of them are very difficult to distribute, given cold storage facilities being minimal at best.
There's a real problem with the current distribution of where the vaccines have been administered, as you noted. Very few of those doses, a very small proportion of them, have been used in low and middle income countries. Modeling would suggest that if we don't provide some equity in the distribution of vaccines in the first year of use, then global COVID deaths will double. And also there will be a dramatic $4 to $5 trillion impact on the high income economies as those economies are pulled back by countries and low and middle income countries where the pandemic is still raging. So we really need to develop a plan, and we have one, for allowing low and middle income countries to share in the benefits of vaccination.
Tell me, what about the vaccines themselves? Which ones do you think are the most effective at this point? What are your thoughts on, for instance, Sinovac, Biotech, China National Biotech, and also Sputnik 5 out of Russia?
So I would tend to favor the vaccines that are approved and proven to be safe and efficacious by what we call the stringent national regulatory authorities, the US FDA, the European Union, the MHRA, and the United Kingdom. But as a backup, we have something called WHO Emergency Use Listing. And right now, only 2 vaccines are approved by WHO, and only one of those vaccines is available through this global consortium called COVAX. The Chinese vaccines, actually now maybe CanSino should be counted among them, and the Gamaleya Russian vaccine should be in the queue for WHO Emergency Use Listing. And we hope that once approvals are given, that these vaccines will also be accepted into the global consortium known as COVAX.
Jerome, we have South Africa halting its AstraZeneca vaccine rollout amid questions about its efficacy. What do you make of that? Is it too early to dismiss the AstraZeneca vaccine?
So we do know that the AstraZeneca vaccine does work in populations where the South African variant is not circulating. I think the thing that the South African episode illustrates is that, we always seem to be surprised by COVID-19. We really have to base our judgments on science. We can't hope that the vaccine is going to work against variants. We need to show that it does. And so far, 2 of the vaccines from Novavax and Johnson & Johnson, have actually been tested in South Africa against the South African variant. And then the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, at least in a test tube, appear to be able to create infection-fighting proteins or antibodies that bind to and inactivate the South African variant. A test tube result is encouraging, but really clinical trial results, testing the vaccine and actually showing that it protects against disease, is the most important thing.
That South African variant is now found in other countries, including the UK. Will that, I guess, put in jeopardy their recovery?
So the hope is that several of the other vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, and Novavax vaccines, will have efficacy, will be able to prevent disease from the variant COVID-19. But at the same time, it's not only the vaccine. It's the use of masks, distancing, hygiene. All those things put together will help to control the pandemic, that is the spread of the mutant coronaviruses, and also prevent the emergence of new coronaviruses, new mutants. And that's actually equally important. So remember, it's not only the vaccine, but it's the continued use of masks and social distancing.
Vaccine supplies remain limited. In fact, production has been slower than anticipated. When do you think that can be ramped up? When do you think the world will have enough?
That's a great question, and I wish I had a perfect answer. But it's going to be a difficult first 6 months as the different companies are ramping up, scaling up their manufacturing capability. It's not unusual to see these kinds of interruptions early on, and hopefully as both Western and now Chinese and perhaps Russian companies are scaling up production, we'll start to see the kind of supply by the end of the year that we're hoping for, that will allow enough people to be vaccinated so that globally we can reach some sort of herd protection by 2022 to 2023.
Are we likely to get it?
Herd protection, hopefully we won't see more variants that are resistant to the immune responses generated by the vaccines. The companies at the same time are working on new forms of the vaccine, additional elements to add to the vaccine to make them work better against the variants. But again, we can control the current outbreaks using vaccination in addition to masks and distancing. That will not only control the current outbreak, including the variants, but also decrease the chances of generating new variants. And that's really important. I mean, we're not only fighting the fight now, but we're also trying to position ourselves well for the future battle against COVID-19.
Are there any other pathogens which we can learn from here? I mean, for instance, we get the flu virus on a yearly basis. That's a bit of a guess, really, as to how that virus is actually mutated. Is there anything that we can learn about the future direction of these particular variants and how they form?
Yes, so, and again, it looks like the appearance of the variants corresponded to a dramatic increase in the number of transmissions. So controlling transmissions is very critical, not only for getting control of the current spread of the variants, but also in terms of generation new variants. In order to mutate itself and to spread the variants, the virus has to spread from person to person. So to the extent that we can limit that, get many more people vaccinated, encourage the use of masks and distancing, then hopefully we'll be able to get a hold not only of the current variants, but also prevent the emergence of future ones. And that's actually a very critical step.
Jerome, earlier you said that the vaccine rollout has been pretty impressive, but at the current rate, it's estimated that it'll take 7 years to end the pandemic. Do you agree with that assessment?
So it's always difficult to look at the information or data in the very early time periods because, what are we doing? We're basing our current 7-year projection on the current rates of vaccination. So I think you'll remember that in the United States, it started very slow, and it took a while to ramp up to 1 million to 1.5 million doses a day. And it's going to be like that in many countries around the world. The infrastructure needs to adapt to vaccination. So I hope that as more countries begin to roll out vaccination in Europe, but also in low and middle income countries, we're going to see the kinds of rates of vaccination we need to see in order to have at least 60% of people vaccinated by the end of 2022.